Really excited to be out here because I look around, I see a lot of friends in the industry. I see a lot of people that are passionate about the same things, uh, that want to invest in protecting critical infrastructure, that they see the mission, they feel fulfilled, or they're fulfilled when they get to protect our infrastructure. So getting to be part of that is really, really exciting. We're going to talk about network asset visibility because this really is a foundation that you can get in place and that will allow you to build out all these other aspects of your cyber program, and that will ensure you have success when you do that. I get to be part of an awesome organization that saw a need for this, and let me kind of go crazy, empowered me to just find out what we need to, let's get that approved. Let's get that built out. Let's invest in the future to safeguard, protect, and ensure that we can provide water. So I was happy to be part of such an awesome mission and part of the overall, ICS community in Houston. I'll tell a little bit of a story. I got a couple of them throughout here. This was essentially the first network map I got in OT. I've been in OT for about 13 years. A few of us are laughing because we probably had a very similar experience. We knew we had plants out there. We knew we had them connected via some private radios we owned and some towers. That was about it. Did not really have a detailed understanding of what all existed at that facility, and for sure did not understand all the different IP addresses, protocols that they were speaking, all the different interconnections between devices on site and with other plants and facilities. There were a lot of blind spots. And when you look at a map like that, that's not the exact map we had, but something like that, you see why there's blind spots. I mean, there is no visibility in that, and for me, it all goes back to you cannot protect what you do not see. If you don't know what's in your plant, you can't secure it, plain and simple. So we knew we had to do something better, and we invested in that. The reason we invest in that is because the increasing threats that are out there. So we've probably heard some of these numbers already thrown out, but just to emphasize this, right now there's 23 different APTs being tracked that have a demonstrated interest and demonstrated ability to attack and to gain access, modify that OT environment. Of those 23 groups, there's probably a handful that target your specific sector. Being in the water sector, I know there's a few groups of those 23 that target water specifically. I need to protect against those groups. That number has gone up every single year. I would bet money it's probably going to go up next year and the year after. On the ransomware side of the house, we see 80 groups now that are being tracked that are targeting industrial control systems with ransomware. We're seeing, I think the latest number I saw was about 1,700 different ransomware attacks on industrial control systems last year. The number of groups, 60% increase over last year. So we've got all these different threats. The way we protect against it, and I'm glad I've already heard it mentioned once, are the 5 critical controls. These are put out by SANS. The SANS systematically went through and did a study of all these different OT attacks that they've seen, sat down, how do we prevent them? How do we mitigate? How do we recover? And what can we do? And this represents the 5 things that need to be done. We need to have visibility into our OT environment. We need to have a defensible architecture. We need to have secure remote access, risk-based vulnerability management, and a OT incident response plan. That's how we secure our environment. Now for me, I'm going to talk about the asset visibility piece. That is the core, to me, that the rest of these are going to build upon. And I'm going to stop there because nobody wants to listen to me talk about all 5 for the next 3 to 4 hours. If you want to, find me after this session. We'll keep talking. You may regret it, but I will talk to you all night long. I love talking about this stuff, and most of us here do. That's why we're here. We're passionate about cybersecurity. So let's talk about the OT network visibility. We threw this up there earlier. That's not visibility. We don't see anything there. What we want is something more along the lines of this. Your actual plant probably is much larger than this. You probably have a lot more devices. But the Purdue model here kind of gives us a nice representation of the information we want to know. We want to know what pumps, valves, motors, sensors, blowers we have out in the field. We want to know the protocols those are talking, the configuration. We want to know how those communicate with our PLCs. We want to know how those PLCs talk to one another. Where are the spots where our PLCs now start moving up in that security stack to our control levels where they're talking with our HMIs, maybe our primary SCADA servers? From there, where do we move up into our engineering workstations, our development environment, our historians? We want to know what those devices are, what else they talk to, those communication paths. What about our DMZs? Do we know if we have a web server there? Do we know if we have public historians, jump boxes? We need to know all that information. We need to know what they're talking to, what protocols they're allowed to speak, and how, and when they're talking, when those doors are open. I heard it thrown out already, if you've got remote access in your environment, does that need to be open 24/7? Do we know when that connection is live? So we need kind of this map. How do we get there? Well, we break it down, or I break it down into 4 different sources of information that's going to build out kind of a comprehensive programming. We've got the passive monitoring systems. This is what we typically think of when we're talking about asset visibility in an OT environment. It's a network sensor that lives off to the side via a span port or a network tap, and we're just feeding it all this network traffic, letting it chew on that, digest it, pull out the metadata, create those maps for us, show us the traffic flows. It doesn't actually interact. It's not active. So that's our traditional method in OT environments. But it's not perfect. It doesn't catch everything. So I like to say we're going to complement it with active scanning. Now, who in here has heard that you do not do active scanning in a OT environment? I think almost every conversation I had when I got into OT was do not do active scanning. There are some dangers with active scanning, but there's also a lot of value in active scanning. So let's talk about that a little bit in a couple minutes and see, is there a way we can safely roll out active scanning in our environment to enrich data? Physical walkthroughs. Marco kicked us off this morning. I was so happy when he mentioned boots on the ground. There are a few scenarios, I'm going to share a couple, where there is no substitution for physical walkthroughs. It is the only method you will find out certain information. A couple things I thought wouldn't happen in update all that often. So if I only need to pull that firmware version once every 5 minutes, consultants, contractors that would leave cell modems and PLC cabinets with good intentions of providing support and that, and thought that would never happen. It's got to be made up, got to be a little bit exaggerated. So I did a physical walkthrough one day, and okay, here's our PLC cabinet, and opened it up, and sure enough, there's a cell modem sitting inside, connected to the PLC, and why is that there? Oh, it's so the vendor can log in and troubleshoot for us when they need it. Okay, let's talk about the security risks, and let's see what we can do to mitigate this. Walked into a control room. We knew we had an HMI in there. Asset management, our passive monitoring picked up that device. But when I walked into the control room, I noticed there were 2 Ethernet cables running out of the back of that PC. So I followed the first one over to the wall and traced it back. It went to the SCADA switch and tied into the SCADA servers. Great. Followed the other one and it went back over to the IT switch. Looked at the network config. They had a bridge set up. Well, that's just great. So now we've got traffic that can bypass our firewalls. Went out, and great time to talk with operations about their needs even. Every time we went to this far end of the plant, to this little building, the workstation was powered down. First time, didn't think much of it. Second time, we asked them about it, and they're like, oh yeah, we don't ever use that. We just turn it off when we're out here. Okay, so can we remove it? Can we pull it out of the environment? Oh yeah, no, that's fine. It saves us from having to come out here and turn it off. That's one less vulnerability we have. That's one less device that we have to maintain, one less device that we have to update now. So saved ourselves a little bit of money, saved ourselves a little bit of work, all because we did this physical walkthrough with our operations team. Now there are some risks to that. There are high voltage panels we need to get in. I am not a certified licensed electrician. I don't have the equipment to properly and safely power all those things down and open them up. Arc flash is a real thing. Arc flash can kill you. Make sure you work with your maintenance teams, your maintenance department, or the personnel that are responsible for the electrical and getting in those MCCs, and that can ensure that you do it safely. If you've got radios, chances are they're up high on a tower somewhere. But have you had the proper training to climb those towers? Do you have the proper PPE? We've got to go up in those environments sometimes. It's not the funnest thing to do, especially in the middle of summer in Texas, but it's got to be done. We find valuable information from doing these things. So don't skip it. Just make sure you do it safely. Don't risk losing your life just to open a panel and look in there. But physical walkthroughs, absolutely, make sure they're critical. Make sure you're doing those. Finally, our configuration management piece. And we mentioned this, we want to know what the configurations are, who's making those changes, why they're making those changes. We want to ensure that those changes are getting approved and authorized in a proper manner. And a lot of this ties back into things like incident response. If something happens, if there's a cyber attack that takes equipment offline, can we get it back online? If I have to replace equipment, anybody deal with a lightning strike ever? Can you control lightning? Has anybody seen it go right past the lightning protection and still blow up everything in that panel? Lightning does what lightning wants to do. Despite the best efforts, the best lightning protection out there, I've seen it blow up entire panels. How quick can I get that PLC back online? Pretty quick if I've got a backup of it. If I've got a configuration file that I can just load on, slap a new PLC in that panel, hey, we're back up and running in no time. Well, what about who's authorized to make those changes? We can set up alerts and rules that if so-and-so makes a change from this engineering workstation, I trust it. I don't need to know about it. But what about that PC on the other side of the county that has never made a PLC download, and all of a sudden it's making a PLC download? I might want to know who's making that change, why they're making that change, and I may want to go see who's sitting at that workstation. And then again, once those changes are made, do we have a process to get those configurations updated, to update our backups? Are we storing our backups offline? So if something happens, those backups aren't corrupted, encrypted, what have you. So the configuration management piece kind of becomes an important piece of understanding what is truly going on with our assets. Why are they configured the way they are? Why do they do the things they do? We need all four of these pieces of information. Once we've got all that information, we can start doing a lot of really fun things. We can start identifying our critical assets, crown jewels. There are certain pieces of equipment, certain processes that are not as critical. They're still important, but they're not as critical. Maybe they're processes that we can easily run in manual. Maybe they're processes that are optional, that can be bypassed entirely. Maybe they're devices that are easily replaced. The other side of it is we have devices that are absolutely necessary. A lot of membrane systems nowadays, can't really run those manually. You have to have those automated. The PLCs controlling that become more important maybe than some of the other PLCs. Certain pieces of equipment are very, very expensive. That ties back into what are our crown jewels. All of us are probably limited by the amount of people, our personnel, the amount of time we have, the amount of funding we have. So we want to make sure we're investing in those crown jewels first. It's not that we ignore the rest of it, but we protect that first, then we start worrying about getting to the rest of the things. We can start doing network analysis. We talked about this a little bit with our passive monitoring, knowing our traffic flows, both the east to west and the north to south traffic flows. Once I can start visualizing that, where are my entry points into the network? Can I lock those down? Can I close down ports? Do I need to even have it open? Where's my east to west flow? You know, we talked about the wastewater plant that's over here talking to a water plant on the other side of the county. If they have no business talking to each other, let's block them from talking to each other. Let's address the defensible architecture piece. Let's address network segmentation that we need to have in our facilities to slow down, to stop an attack. So all this becomes things we can do with network analysis. Vulnerability management. When we have accurate OS versions, firmware versions, we can narrow down that list of CVEs. Anybody know the number of CVEs that are out right now? Last I looked, 300,000, and that was a little while back that applied. So how do I approach that list? I don't. That's overwhelming to start going through that. But when I have good vulnerability management, all of a sudden that list is knocked down to 30, 40 different CVEs that apply in my environment. I can manage that. Even better, some of these get categorized by their CVSS score into things I need to address now. There's active exploits going on with this CVE to here's the things that could theoretically be exploited under ideal certain conditions that I don't really need to worry about. Patching is not always an option in OT. So what are the mitigations that we have? Those require us to get creative. They're not as quick and straightforward as just applying a patch and rebooting. So it takes time. I've got to get that list of CVEs down to a manageable number and know which ones to focus on. And finally, my OT incident response plan. Similar, we can't protect what we don't see, what we don't know is in our environment. We can't respond and rebuild and recover our environment if we don't know what's in it. OT incident response is drastically different than IT incident response. In IT, sometimes we have time to start doing the analysis, looking at artifacts, collecting the logs, examining all that before we start recovery. OT is all about the process, and that process has to run 24/7. So I don't necessarily have the time to start digging in and doing the analysis before I start restoring the process, restoring devices to get the process going. I've got to save that data and then start getting everything going again. So our OT incident response plan is going to look very different. We're focusing on the process. It's going to have different people involved than an IT incident. Does our plan accurately reflect that? To rebuild that system, do we have an accurate representation of the devices that we're working on and working with? All that needs to be in our OT response plan. So that's why it becomes so important, and that's why I say OT asset visibility, the network monitoring, that is really the foundation that builds your cyber posture, that builds your program. We have to have that in place so that we can ensure we have a defensible architecture, so that we ensure we can look at the remote access if it's allowed, monitor that connection, and see what's going on internally. We need it for risk-based vulnerability management to narrow down that list so that we can build out a program that we can sustain and not just dump on some newbie and have them burn out within 3 months because we handed them a couple 100,000 CVEs to sift through. And finally, it lets us build out that OT incident response plan so that we can keep the process running or restore that process as fast as possible. So that's why I view asset inventory as so important. That's why I think it's on those 5 critical controls. We've got a couple minutes. If anyone has questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them.